The uncanny valley. It's something you hear a lot these days. Basically, it's a theory of the relation between an object or thing that resembles human beings, but there's just something not right about it. This relation, in turn, causes strange feelings of uneasiness or even revulsion. In this episode of my new series, Strange Encounters, I'm going to bring you firsthand the accounts of people who have experienced run-ins with unknown cryptids and creatures firsthand and lived to tell the tale. But before I get started, if you enjoy content covering the world of the strange and unexplained, from cryptids and creatures to aliens and UFOs, the paranormal, forbidden history, and more, make sure to subscribe to my channel, smash that like button, and hit the bell icon for notifications on new content. And as always, I'm your host, Jeff. This is Strangeology, where we explore the world of weird. Let's go. The first story comes from an anonymous woman that happened around 10 years ago when she was a teenager. To this day, she maintains that this is the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to her in her life. She was enjoying spending time with her 3 friends on an island during summer vacation. They had been spending the day in the town on the island and decided to walk back home when it started to get dark out. The walk was around a half an hour, so not a long distance by any means, and it's a road that they had traveled before. It turned from city to forest pretty quick. There were no lampposts or anything like that to light the way. The only thing that would light the way was the full moon and starlight. The road they followed was only wide enough to fit a single car, and each side was flanked by old stone walls and olive trees. Beyond that was untouched forest. As they were walking, one of her friends suggested that they stop and hang out at a familiar well that was off the side of the road down a path and only about halfway back to the house that they were staying at. Now, they've walked this road many times before, and it wasn't the first time they had stopped to rest and hang out near this old well, but this time was different. As they approached the well, one of her friends took out his phone and turned on the flashlight. He then shined it towards the well, and in that moment, some thing peeked out from behind it. It looked like a person, but whatever it was definitely wasn't human. The group paused for a moment, and once they realized they were facing off with some unknown creature, they screamed and ran back to the house as fast as they could. Afterwards, still scared out of their wits, they all tried to say what they saw, and while they only saw its head, the consensus was that it was bald with pale yellowish skin, and whatever this thing was had no normal human facial features, only a set of deep-set, large black circles for eyes. What it was, she doesn't know, but it still haunts her and her friends' thoughts to this day, so much so that if she is ever in the area or traveling near that road, she gets chills. Some say this creature may match the description of something known as a pale crawler, but leave a comment and let me know what you think it is. This next story comes from a man who we'll call Joe, who was out hiking with friends near the San Bernardino National Forest, just outside of the greater Los Angeles area. Joe and his friends were making their way to Clark's Summit, but the further along they went, they started to veer off the trail. He asked his female friend, who we'll call Jenny, who was in front of the group on the trail, why she was gradually headed more and more into the woods, and less so on the trail. Jenny said that she could hear the sounds of a woman calling out for help and asked the group if anyone else could hear it. As it turns out, Jenny was apparently the only one hearing this woman. Perhaps it was just an animal like a bear, which can sometimes mimic the sound of a person in distress, so Joe and his other friends kept trying to convince Jenny to leave it alone. It was probably an animal, and the sun was already starting to set, and they were already near the spot they had planned to set up camp for the night. Jenny kept on insisting, saying that this woman sounded really close by and didn't feel right about ignoring her potentially being in need of help. Seems reasonable, right? Now, here's where things get weird. Joe, Jenny, and their friends had completely left the hiking trail at this point, only by about 300 to 400 meters. They've all been on this trail before and knew it like the back of their hand. So venturing that distance into the woods shouldn't have been too big of a deal, but once they were out there, they seemed to lose sight of their surroundings. After no woman was found out there, the group decided to head back to the trail, where they walked for about 20 minutes towards the direction they came from, where they thought the trail was, but only found more wilderness. Again, they tried a different direction, and still no sign of the trail. It's like the trail had been completely swallowed up by the forest. At this point, Joe stated that he started to feel lightheaded and dizzy, as did his other friends. Joe began to suspect that something strange was happening to them. It was almost like something or some force had changed the environment around them, or moved them somehow to another location and was purposely disorienting them. By now, it was completely dark outside, and they needed a plan. Jenny once again heard the female voice call out to her, and it was saying, "I'm over here, please help me." To Jenny, this voice sounded like the person was hurt and crying. It sounded real, but still, nobody else in the group heard it. Just what was going on? Joe made the call that they needed to stop and avoid getting more lost. They needed to set up their camp right away. So they found the nearest clearing and set up their 2 tents and started settling in for the night, figuring that they would easily be able to find the trail once the morning hit. Everything was set up, the campfire was going, and just before the group was about to sit down and settle in, Joe noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. When he looked towards this motion, he saw a nearby tree moving like something was climbing it. He whispered to his friends to get eyes on the tree since he wears glasses and couldn't quite make out what it was that was moving this tree at first, coupled with the darkness outside. He thought it was just an animal, but the longer he and the others looked, they could only see this kind of humanoid outline. It was see-through, completely transparent, and appeared almost like heat waves emanating from a hot surface some 50 feet up in the tree. They figured the only reason they could see this wavy warping effect was because of its backdrop against the foliage. Joe's other friends recoiled and asked, "What the hell are we looking at?" For the next few minutes, the group just stood still, whispering back and forth to each other, trying to figure out just what this thing was. Was it an optical illusion? An alien? Or were they just seeing things? Could it have been the source of the voice that Jenny was hearing? Whatever they were seeing was perched up on a branch, 50 feet up, just watching them. After about 10 minutes, Joe realized that all the sounds in the forest, the animals, the insects, the wind, everything had gone completely silent. When he realized this and knew something was wrong, the hair on his neck stood up and he got goosebumps all over. A few more minutes passed and whatever this creature or thing was began to climb higher up into the tree canopy and out of sight. Joe and his friends then approached the base of this tree and tried craning their necks up to the sky to see if they could see anything, but it was too dark to see up that high in the tree. They listened for a while but couldn't hear any movement, or like it had potentially jumped to another tree as the forest they were in was fairly dense. Not wanting to camp under whatever this thing was, they decided to grab their things and go. Still being lost, they decided to walk towards the moon, and after only 5 minutes of walking, to their astonishment, when they found themselves back on the trail, Joe dropped his bag in complete bewilderment as they were at least a 20 to 30 minute hike into the forest, and somehow they just happened to stumble upon the trail in no time. Joe's friend likes to joke that maybe they walked through hallucinogenic spores, but Joe said that whatever this thing was felt predatory in nature, and that the voice that Jenny was hearing was being used to lure the group further and further into the woods and confuse them. To what end, they weren't sure. And Jenny still believes that Joe and his other friends were messing with her, saying that they couldn't hear this voice that to her sounded real as day. Was this thing going to attack them, or perhaps it realized it was outnumbered and let the group go? Whatever it was could move fairly silently and scale a tall tree quickly and with seemingly little effort. And how did Joe and his friends get so lost that close to a trail they were intimately familiar with? There was, without a doubt, something very strange lurking in that forest, and whatever it is anyone's best guess. Certainly, it had capabilities of high strangeness. And of course, leave a comment if you have any ideas of what this thing could have been. The final story for tonight comes from a Reddit user, The Hybrid, who had a very harrowing encounter with an unknown being. This incident happened several years ago when they were a teenager, and they prefaced this story by saying that they can't explain what happened, and they don't believe in things like cryptids or the paranormal. The story goes that one of their friend's parents owned a property that had a lot of anchorage on it. One day, the hybrid and his friend, along with a few other mutual friends, decided to go deep into the woods on this property to build a treehouse and some forts. And this isn't something unusual by any means that kids do. What kid doesn't love having a secret hideout somewhere in the woods if they live in a place like this? Some place to get away from it all. So this group of kids bring a bunch of supplies way out and find a good spot to build this treehouse. And for years, it became their sanctuary to hang out, get away from parents and responsibilities, and just have a good time. A nice old clubhouse. Now, nothing out of the ordinary ever happened until one time when the hybrid and one of his friends, a cousin of the kid whose parents owned this property that the treehouse was on, decided to spend the night there. Interestingly, after all these years they had been using this spot, it was the first time that either one of them had ever done an overnight there. They tried to convince their other friends to go, but they weren't allowed, or the last friend that could kind of chickened out. So they got there early in the day and spent the time hanging out, climbing trees, talking, reading comic books, using a tire swing that they built, just all around fun stuff to do for the whole afternoon. Around 9 p.m., they settled into their sleeping bags for the night on the ground below the treehouse. The hybrid and his friend chatted for around 10 minutes, and then suddenly he heard rustling in the woods nearby. Naturally, this would alarm anybody because you don't know what kind of animal is going to be out there. Is it a bear? Is it a fox? A coyote? He sat up and looked out into the forest, and he immediately saw this nearby figure, a tall humanoid silhouette that was completely transparent. He squinted to try to focus beyond the darkness and saw this thing quickly climb up a nearby tree and out of sight. He had no idea what he saw, if it was a trick of the eye or if something was really there. Fear hadn't set in yet, but in an abundance of caution and not wanting this thing to hear him, he turned to his friend and whispered, "There's something in the woods looking at us." And his friend's facial expression quickly turned into dread. They decided it was best to head out of there, so they left their things. They'd probably just get them in the morning and decided to start calmly walking down the path that led out of the forest. They didn't want to run and cause whatever this thing was to give chase if it was an animal, or if there was anything there at all. A few minutes into the walk, and they began to feel strange, like they were confused or experiencing deja vu. The hybrid maintains that they didn't do drugs, there were no hallucinogenic plants around, and the only thing they ate was food that they brought from their homes. As they stumbled down the dark path, the world around them seemed to slow down, and it became very disorienting. Having gone to this fort in the woods for years, they knew exactly how long it took to get out of the woods. However, at this point, they were still deep in the woods, and in a place that seemed very unfamiliar, like the trees around them were changing. They didn't recognize anything. Hybrid realized something was really wrong when they should have been out of the forest by now, and they were just in this completely new area that they didn't understand or recognize. His friend then suddenly yelled out, "Yeah, I'm coming." Hybrid, who was facing the other direction, turns around and asks who his friend is talking to. And this friend says he's talking to his mother, calling his name to help lead him out of the forest. The hybrid says he can't hear anything at all. "What are you talking about?" His friend then looks at him like he's crazy and starts to walk off the path and deeper into the woods. The hybrid grabs his friend's arm, saying he doesn't want him to get lost in the woods and that they need to stay on the path. In that moment, his friend then sees this transparent being perched on a tree branch in the direction that he was hearing his mom's voice. He points it out to Hybrid, and they notice its invisibleness, like it's a heat wave, much like the previous story. They stared at it for about 10 seconds, trying to figure out if it was real or not. They soon got their answer as they saw it hunch down, like it was stalking them, and then it quickly climbed further up the tree it was in before bounding to another nearby tree, and then another one, and another one, quickly closing the gap of distance between them and getting closer. All the while, this thing is completely silent, which was accentuated by how silent the rest of the forest had become, which the hybrid had just noticed. There was no sound of insects or night animals or wind. The silence was broken when this creature arrived at a tree just above them, and they could hear the branch it landed on creak under its weight. At that point, they freaked out and decided to start running in terror away from this thing. Who knows what it was? And while they were running, they could hear it keeping pace with them, jumping from tree to tree without effort, eventually getting ahead of them. And it was strange because of this thing appearing. It also seemed like it must have been very light because of how little noise it was making and how stealthy it was. It wasn't really jostling the trees all that much, but Hybrid and his friend kept running in the same direction, and somehow they wound up back at the treehouse in about 20 seconds. They decided to grab all their things on the ground as fast as they could and rushed into the treehouse and closed the door behind them, wedging a small piece of wood to keep it shut. Shortly after they closed the door, they could hear this thing, whatever it was, climbing up the ladder to the treehouse door, and it was making these odd noises, like it was mimicking the sound of rain and wind, even though there was no weather happening outside. There was no rain in the forecast or anything like that. And after a few moments, they no longer heard the creature, and the hybrid figured that it may have given up and left. They decided to stay in the treehouse until the sun came up, and it was almost to the point of dawn anyway. Hybrid's friend then checked the time on his iPod, which said 5 a.m. They had laid down at 9 p.m. that evening, but somehow 8 hours of time had passed in what only felt like 40 minutes of time from their first encounter with this creature. Hybrid and his friend eventually made it out of the forest safely, but never went back for another overnight there again, much less staying out there past 5 p.m. even. Every few months, they would discuss the incident to make sure that they were still on the same page about what had happened and that it was real. Now, just what happened to the hybrid and his friend? Was something out in those woods? Let me know in the comments. Alright everyone, thanks for listening to these stories tonight. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'd love to read your responses. The phenomena of pale crawler creatures and translucent humanoids, and glimmermen if you will, seem to be increasing in frequency, especially in national parks, happening to ordinary people like you and I. Whatever these things are seem to enjoy messing with or scaring people, but what do they want? And are these stories just made up? Is there a rational explanation behind these encounters? Or is there something else out there on the fringes of our world that we just don't understand yet? I'll leave that up to you to decide. If you like this video, do me a favor and smash the like button, as it helps me out a lot to get this video ranked in the algorithm. And if you're new to my channel, make sure to hit the red subscribe button below and turn on notifications so YouTube will let you know when a new video of mine drops. And that's it for this one. If you want to check out more from me, you can find my podcast here on YouTube, the Strangeology Podcast, or on most podcasting platforms. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and keep it strange.